Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Navigating the OpenEdge Migration Journey. Today we are joined by our speakers, Roy Ellis, Chris Longo, and Marco Squintani. Roy started in Progress over 28 years ago in tech support. Roy then spent over 20 years in development, helping to deliver products like App Server and Web Speed, OpenEdge Management, and most recently, Progress Application Server for OpenEdge. Roy has been the Director of Managed Database Services for the last 2 years. Chris is the Service Delivery Manager for OpenEdge applications in North America. Chris has a long history with the OpenEdge platform. He has spent many years delivering consulting and architectural services related to the OpenEdge platform, as well as spending many years delivering OpenEdge training and speaking at various conferences. Today, Chris and his team provide services related to PaaS enablement, security, CI/CD, migrations, and UX and modernization. Marco started with Progress 4GL in 1992 as a developer. Marco then spent over 30 years in training, consulting, and project management, helping Progress customers in reaching their business and technical goals. We found a lot of memories of Marco's time spent helping many different companies in designing, developing, and implementing IT initiatives that create core value. I'll now turn it over to Roy to start the presentation. Roy?
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it. We just have a few slides to introduce the migration process, leaving most of our time for questions. Chris, Marco, and I will be available for questions after the presentation. Our quick agenda includes some considerations on migration. We will look at the most common migration flows. We'll let you know how we can help, and then it's straight to questions. Again, please add questions to the question panel at any time, and we'll answer them at the end. So our first thing is migration considerations. Let's jump right into those. Our migration considerations include several different things we want to go over before we actually talk about the common flows. So this is the list. Let's just jump right in. Migration considerations are often related to long-term supported versions, which we've been using since 11.7.4. If you have questions about LTS or long-term support, please drop them in the questions panel. We're not going to go over those now. Our main goal here is to remind you that 11.7 is retiring in less than 15 months, which may seem like a long time, but if you have a large, complicated environment, it really isn't. Remember, when an LTS retires, you can still call tech support and ask for professional services, but you won't get bug fixes, and you won't get those very important security fixes after this date. And this is probably one of the reasons why so many of you are on this call right now, because you know that 11.7 is retiring and you need to move up. As important as a version support is the platform support. OpenEdge has announced retirements for several operating systems, and this is how your OpenEdge versions are supported. With Solaris, that was retired in 12.5, which means the last LTS it supported in is 12.2, which again is still good till 2028. HP was retired in 12.1, so it did not make it to the 12.2 LTS. So if you want to continue on HPUX, that's only supported in 11.7. And again, that retires in April of 2025. Lastly, AIX was also retired in 12.5, so its last version supported is 12.2. All right, moving in from the platform dependencies, we segue nicely into some of the things we have dependencies in scripting.
Thank you, Roy. So if your migration includes a change in platform, there's a few things that you're probably going to want to consider. So first of all, you need to take a look at how you're maintaining the database, specifically your strategy for backup, for monitoring, for tuning. Those may likely need to be adjusted if you're doing a operating system platform change. You may also need to look at the way you're authenticating. If your authentication process has a dependency on the operating system, then likely that's going to change as you go to a different operating system platform. The other thing that you have to take a look at and be aware of is that your application itself may have operating system dependencies embedded within the OpenEdge code artifacts. So specifically, you want to be looking at your OS commands, input, output through those OS commands again, can have a dependency on the pre-existing platform, and they may not need to be changed, or they may need to be slightly adjusted for your target OS platform.
Right. And we just went through this on a customer recently who was surprised that their application was actually creating scripts and running them from inside their ABL. And they were surprised, and so were we. So there were some things that needed to be changed as they changed platforms.
If your migration plans include a cloud migration, you're going to the cloud. Couple things to keep in mind. It's not just a remote connection. It's not just a computer. I mean, it's up in the cloud or a remote connection somewhere. You have to be aware that there are networking changes that have to be looked at, security, and accessing the cloud itself and the cloud infrastructure, managing or planning for disk, CPU, and memory allocations, load balancing potentially. Different cloud providers have different load balancing options. Obviously, if your application is browser ready, browser-based cloud is a great platform, great solution for that. But if it's not, you have to take a look at what is the user experience like, and how am I delivering that? I mean, am I delivering it as a terminal emulators? Are they graphical clients running on the desktop? Those have to be looked at and considered when you move to the cloud. Also, if your migration is an upgrade to version 12, you have to consider the fact that the classic app server that's available on previous versions of OpenEdge is not available on 12. So you're going to be putting in or implementing a new app server platform, PaaS. I'm sure everybody's heard of it. It's been around now for close to 10 years. But PaaS is not the classic app server, it's completely different. It's rooted in Tomcat, and as such, there are many more configuration files that need to be looked at and can be tuned for your application. A big part of what we do when we assist our customers with upgrades is re-architecting their existing app server strategy for PaaS, and then assisting with tuning and monitoring. So again, like I said, the re-architecture has to be done for classic app server, going to PaaS, and then for your tuning and monitoring, this just kind of articulates the fact that there are far more options for monitoring the PaaS app server than there was in PaaS. There's OpenEdge Management, JMX, OE Manager, REST APIs, and again, this is something we help customers with through consulting services, mentoring, that kind of thing. Some of the things that you might want to consider from an application perspective as you move off of a classic app server to a PaaS environment. PaaS out of the box is not tuned for batch processing or long running procedures. So you'll want to do some tuning for that kind of thing, because ultimately PaaS is running on Tomcat, which is a web server, and there are some timeout considerations that need to be looked at if you're using the classic app server for, like I said, for batch processing. And heavy OS commands is another area that should be looked at, and PaaS can be tuned to support that. Again, those are the kind of things that we run into as part of an upgrade from classic to PaaS. As you move to the version 7 environment or platform, generally speaking, it's a 64-bit platform. There is still a 32-bit Windows version available on 12, but if you have 32-bit dependencies, you need to be aware of the fact that those have to be addressed somehow, some way, especially if they're dependencies in the server-side code that would need to run on PaaS, because PaaS is a 64-bit platform only. There is no 32-bit, and so this is another area that we assist customers with.
So if the customer has a lot of OCXs on their 32-bit client, they could continue to run on 12.2 on their client, but they would have to make sure everything for the 64-bit servers that are up to date, right, Chris?
Right, correct.
Okay,
That's right.
thank you. Okay, we're coming down the home stretch here of the slides. Thanks for sticking with us. Let's talk quickly about some common migration flows. And these are just some very quick common migration flows for us to to lead us off into more discussions as we go down the way. So 2 slides left about migration. We'll talk about how you migrate from one platform to another, and then we're almost on to questions. So let's go. The most common migration flow is you're updating in place. So you're moving from 11.7 to 12, let's say, but you're staying on the same platform. When doing that, the database does not need to be rebuilt, right? It's the same operating systems. You can move the database from one machine to another, copy it, back up over, restore it. And then what you can do is you can upgrade the database in place. So there's a utility _dbutil, which says, hey, make this database a version 12 from a version 11.7. Usually takes minutes. And now you have your database that was 11.7 now running 12. Then it's as simple as moving the uncompiled code to the new version, compiling the code for the new conversion, and testing, right? So you test it when you feel everything is good, then you're ready to either go to production on this box or make another copy and go to production on that. Again, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to move the database over again the last time so you get the most recent data, cut over to the new machine for your go live, and you're ready to go. So this is the easiest migration flow. This is what we usually recommend, doing a proof of concept, doing all your testing on it, and doing the final cutover to it once the testing is done. A word of caution, though, we had one of these. They stayed on the same platform, which was Windows. The migration was very easy. The code compiled very nicely. They tested for 2 weeks and said, let's go live. We went live over the weekend. Really, it was less than a day's worth of work to go live. They said everything looked fine. They came back 2 days later and said, oops, part of the application isn't working because they didn't test it because it was end of the month thing. So a cautionary tale here. Make sure you get a list of all the different things you want to do with the code and test that. Maybe test for a month. So while you're testing your new system, while you're running month-end code, you're actually running the month-end code on the POC to make sure that runs. So again, I'll say this test, and I'll say it on the next slide too. The other common migration flow obviously is, hey, I'm moving off a, let's say, HPUX onto Linux. I'm moving from 11.7 to 12. But of course, you can't take the database and just copy it over. Our databases are not transferable that way. So what you need to do is dump the data off your current OS, copy those files to the new operating system, and load it into a new database. After that, it becomes the same, right? I have a database with data in it that I can compile code against in the new version, and then I can test. And again, test, test, test. Once that testing is complete, then, okay, I'm ready to go live. You're going to have to do the dump and load again, right? So you get the most recent data from your old operating system to your new operating system. So the real difference here is that you just can't copy the database over. You have to do a dump and load. So there's 3 ways to do a dump and load. Again, a part of the migration flows. The easiest is as an ASCII or a data dictionary dump. It's easy to do, but it's slow. But it still might be the best option for you if you're not as comfortable with the other ways, the binary dump and load, and your database is smallish, right? So you might be able to do this in a day using this process. And it's simply dump it out of the dictionary, build a new database, and then load it via the dictionary. So again, easy to do, slower than any of the other ways. The second way is a binary dump and load. It's much faster. You can do it multi-threaded for the dump and for the load on different tables. You have to do an index rebuild when you're done, but it's much faster than the ASCII or data dictionary dump. So if you have a larger database or you're more comfortable with this, this might be the way for you to do it. The last option is for customers that have very large databases where maybe being down for over 2 days to do the migration is too long. So we offer Pro to Pro. Pro to Pro allows minimal downtime, usually hours instead of days, and has a flexible cutover. This requires a professional services engagement. We will help you set it up, run it, and help you with the go live as all part of the engagement. But again, this is for larger databases where the customer can't be down for a whole weekend to do the cutover. All right, and that also segues well into how can we help, right? So I'm in charge of the database services, and we have all kinds of services. Obviously, the one we're talking about here is the database migration strategy. We do, many of these concurrently all the time. So we're constantly helping people upgrade or move from one platform to another. We have lots of experiences with it. We can help with backup strategy evolution. We can help with disaster recovery and continuous operation strategy. Just about anything that is database related, we can help you with that. And Chris can help you with application services. Chris?
That's right, Roy. So we do all kinds of work around assisting customers upgrading their application to version 12, as well as platform migrations. Oftentimes, the upgrade involves a migration to PaaS. So all kinds of work around strategies for configuring PaaS, and then also mentoring for maintaining PaaS, tuning PaaS, monitoring PaaS. So yeah, we've got all kind of services related to that, as well as assistance with DevOps. This comes into play oftentimes when you're doing a platform change or operating system change, tweaks to your whole your flow in terms of DevOps when you go to that new target operating system. But we also assist with new DevOps initiatives. So, if you're looking to up your game related to how you are doing your application releases, and you want to use more modernized, automated ways of doing application releases, talk to us. And then, of course, in terms of modernization, we assist with all kinds of modernization related to the user experience, as well as helping you build out an API first strategy.
All right. And I think we're to the big time here. Questions. Again, Chris, myself, and Marco are available for questions. Fire away.
Thanks, Roy. So now we're going to transition to the audience Q&A. We do have many questions coming in, so let's get started. So guys, why would I go to 12.2 now instead of going right to 12.8?
Well, I'll just quickly answer. I think you should go to 12.8 now that it's been released, and that's the new long-term supported OpenEdge platform. So
Right, but there may be reasons you can't. If you're on, if you just purchase an AIX and you want to get some value out of that machine you just ran, you may want to stay on 12.2 for a while. So I agree. Obviously, with Chris, you should go right to 12.8. But if you do have to go to 12.2 for a little bit of time before you can move to 12.8, the migration from 11.7 to 12.2 is pretty large, but the migration from 12.2 to 12.8 won't be that difficult. So it's as a matter of the work, it's not as bad not being able to go to 12.8 right now. So
Great, thank you. Can you sideload V12 on the same machine and migrate from 11.7 to 12 on the same machine?
Sure. The answer there is yes, of course. Progress, even on Windows, will keep the two different versions apart from each other. Moving it on the same machine has some difficulties on some things you have to think about, right? Ports will be in contention. You have to keep the ProPass straight and all that, but it's definitely possible. And I know people have done it. It's just sometimes it's easier to do it on another machine. And especially a lot of the customers I've dealt with are not only moving, let's say they're staying on Linux when they're migrating from 11.7 to 12, but they're also upgrading their Linux OS. And that OS may not support both versions. So it's something you have to think about.
Do you have somewhere available a sample for a good backup strategy?
We have several things, I think, both in the document and on the K-bases. So if you're there, you can also ask on the communities. If you're not on communities, please get on communities. There's a lot of good information there. We also offer a service where we'll do a diagnostic of your database. We'll check the health of it, and then we'll recommend the backup strategy for your company and which would be best. So I think there's a lot of things out there. You just have to sort of look in different places for it. If you have a specific question there, go ahead and send it to me, ellis@progress.com. We can follow up.
What are the advantages of version 12.8 for migrating a web speed application to PaaS-OE?
Well, when you get to 12.8, there's a couple things. First of all, you have access to the web speed workshop, and also 12.8 supports, if you're using mapped web objects, 12.8 supports that. Those would be the two main advantages of 12.8 over previous versions of 12.
I would also add an important performance gain, because you have to think that PASOE is a web server, while an application, a web application running on web speed, have to make use and rely on a third-party web server, messengers, and so on. So definitely you will notice a performance improvement, I think, regardless by the application.
Right, and one last thing is, since 12.2 PASOE came out, there have been a lot of improvements. We've upgraded to the latest Tomcat in 12.8. There's been a lot of improvements in authorization, encryption, OAuth 2, those types of things, which did not make it in 12.2. So moving to 12.8 will give you those advantages also.
Okay. If you use your existing server, are there any issues with 11 and 12 running alongside each other? Does it cause performance problems?
I mean, not in the fact that you're running them on the same machine, but in the fact that you have two databases and all those users on the same machine, and you're running more memory, memory for each database, then it could be a drain on your operating system resources, right? That would be my first thing. Anything else you, Marco, Chris, you could think of?
Yes, I was thinking that is a good and savvy thing to first monitor what are the current availability of the resources of the system before you take that decision, because if they are already almost to be exhausted, then definitely I would prefer as an option to go on another machine.
Thank you. Can open clients that use the Java generated proxies still connect to PASOE like in the classic app server? IOW Proxygen still works in 12. What are the main changes with 11.7?
The main 11.7 to 12. So that if you're using Proxygen to generate Java classes to connect to your Java application, as you move from a classic app server to the PAS app server, that should all work as it did. However, you probably will have to adjust the connection string to be PAS enabled. Now, whether and that holds true for 11 as well as 12.
How big is the effort of migrating from R.11.7 classic app server to R.12 PASOE, a full stack OpenEdge GUI application?
Okay, so I will take this one because we are talking about a full stack OpenEdge GUI application, unless there is not something too much complicated in the existing app server startup procedure. I would say that the migration effort is very small. In the end, the only impact for the existing code, apart having to recompile it, is that, as Chris was mentioning before, to change the connection string. So it's one simple character string into one statement. So not a big effort. And of course, you have to consider that with that, you will get the benefit of moving from the TCP/IP proprietary protocol on which the connection ran for the classic on the new standard HTTP. And so, yeah, I would use the time that you spare for that migration to run as many possible load and performance tests of your application with your favorite application, stressing the PASOE on HTTP.
Great, thank you. Currently, what keeps us for upgrading is the 32-bit OCX on apps. Would it be better to upgrade to 12.2.5 or 12.5? And of course, start updating to 64-bit OCX.
Well, I think the best alternative is to start updating to 64-bit. Now, as mentioned in the presentation, as a stopgap measure, you have available to you on the 12 platform a 32-bit Windows client that it'll still run your user experience, your UX, as is without, changing out the OCX. I don't know that there's any advantage of 12.5 over 12.2 for 32-bit versus 64-bit.
Okay, great. How reliable is the backward compatibility of Progress code?
It's fairly reliable. The only thing that I have run into is sometimes there have been some bugs in OpenEdge related to the ABL, and sometimes those bugs get remediated in the ABL as you go from if you have a really old version of OpenEdge, you go from like a 10 to 11 or 12, and somewhere along the way they remediated a bug in the ABL, and then you all of a sudden, and maybe you coded for that, you didn't realize it was a bug, and then you get to 12 and all of a sudden things don't work like they used to work because the bug was fixed. That's the only thing I've really run into. Roy, Marco, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that the language is famous to be backward compatible. I'm not aware of any particular statement which has been recently excluded from the compiler. So I guess that compile and go is still an option if you migrate everything on the same machine. Just moving from release A to release B, I don't see major issues in doing.
Hey, Rachel, I see a question here I'd like to answer. Do you mind if I
Go for it.
jump in? Okay,
Yeah.
So there's a question here. Is the path from 11.7 to 12.8 direct, or do I first have to migrate to 12.2? The answer is no. You can move directly to from 11.7 to 12.8. We've had customers recently who moved from very old versions to 12 without a problem. So in most cases, you don't have to go from one version to another. So from 11.7 to 12.8 is the same amount of effort from going 11.7 to 12.2. So as we recommend, 12.8 is now out there. Go to 12.8. Thank you for letting me take over both parts there, Rachel. Back to you.
No problem. I know there's so many questions coming in. Regarding memory leaks, are there any improvements in PAS-OE 12.8 to monitor and handle this?
There have been several additions to after 12.2 to help you monitor and find memory leaks. There's new JMX calls that you can make. You can turn on memory leak checker, and then you can turn it off, and then you can get a dump of things that are memory leaking. So you can do that in production. There's also server-side profiling, which is available in sometime in 12.2 and also available in 12.8. So we have been trying to give you tools other than just the old memory leaker code that you used to have to add and then parse the log file. I don't know of any others, Chris or Marco, do you?
I think you covered it. I think that's
okay.
That's correct, yeah.
Can you explain what it means to move away from shared memory to client server architecture? What is shared memory architecture?
I take this one. This is basically host-based architecture, means that all the processes, both the database broker and the client, are sharing the same memory. So it means that a client process, also called the self-service client, is directly connected to the shared memory. So see basically all the internal structure of it. Client server typically involve two different machines, and so you can really think to that as a remote connection. So two different memories, one shared memory for the database on the server one, and the client are running on a second server. And the client, I remember, can generically be also an instance of the application server.
Great, thank you. What are the most common pitfalls in moving from web speed to web speed on PAS? Are there things we should look for in our existing web speed apps? All are in 64-bit.
So the main thing that I look for in when I'm moving a web speed application off of the classic platform is, does it use mapped web objects? as opposed to like embedded speed script. Because the earlier versions of PaaS on 12 didn't support mapped web objects. 12.8 does. But generally speaking, your web speed application should work just fine on the web transport. As I mentioned before, the only difference might be a connection or a little bit of manipulation of the URL, but it should be just fine.
And what is the best way of migrating web speed application written using eScript framework to OE12?
So when you say eScript, you mean embedded speed script? Is that right?
eScript framework to OE12. I don't have any more information other than that.
I think is a sort of framework which has been created in the UK and used by customer, but not sure. In all cases, yes, or it is eScript and then it's another thing, or is speed script, then it's our own technology.
Right, and we've had this question before. There are extra things you have to do if you're using the eScript framework. Our A team, internal teams, helped the customer through that already, so we can probably get you connected with them. If it's just regular embedded script, or what I think we called Eagle, embedded 4GL, that's probably the best to move from web speed to PaaS-OE. It's the easiest migration. If you're using mapped objects, then that is definitely something you'll have to wait for 12.8 for. Doesn't work in 12.2, and the mapped web objects will work in 12.8 and should be a fairly simple migration at that point.
Great,
The fairly simple migration is also for GGI wrappers. That is really straightforward.
Okay. If we want to abandon the Java Open Client in favor of REST services, what's the best migration path?
The best migration path off of something like that is to start to embrace the web transport and build out an API, a RESTful API catalog. So you're no more proxy gen, no more generating proxies. You're just exposing a industry standard RESTful API that can be consumed by your Java client on the other side.
Great. For migration from a 12.2 database to 12.8 database in the same machine, do you have to perform a dump and load, or can it be done by backup and restore?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that. Could you repeat?
Yeah. For migration from a 12.2 database to 12.8 database in the same machine, do you have to perform a dump and load, or can it be done by a backup and restore?
So if you're staying on the same machine and you're upgrading in place, you can continue to use the same database. But if you're starting to test, all you have to do is copy the database to a backup of the database somewhere else, restore it, and then it's as simple as migrating it in place up to 12.8. Very easy on the same machine and on the same operating system.
Currently, we are running OpenEdge 10.2b08 in production. Is it possible to have PaaS-OE running only and keep our current database version?
Yes, if you run 11.7. So the PaaS platform can reach back one version. So you could be running PaaS on 11.7 and connect to your version 10 database.
Okay. What does it mean exactly when you say 11.7 will be retired in April of 2025?
Okay, so the biggest thing here is April in 2025. What you won't get is any more bug fixes or security patches after that date. So we'll probably deliver a final release right about that time of 11.7, so 11.7.20 something, and then we won't be doing any more development work on 11.7. So no more patches, no more bug fixes, no more security fixes. If you have issues with that, we'll ask you to move up. That doesn't mean you still can't call tech support. You can continue to call tech support. You can continue to call consulting. Your application won't stop working. You just won't be getting those vital bug fixes and security fixes.
Thank you. Our ERP OpenEdge application is working in a distributed environment. How do you migrate all that in the best way and in the shortest way possible?
Well, generally speaking, hard to say because I don't know all the details and the constraints of an environment. But if you're really worried about the time pressure or your time window is very short, then I would try to mitigate the risk, avoiding to do your migration in one go. So I would split the migration into two steps. The first step would be probably first to migrate your application from the classic app server to PASOE, and it could be version 12, of course. And then you can still keep in that first step the database release to be 11.7. And then the second step will be complete the migration by migrating the database from 11.7 to 12. As far as I know, this is the only viable choice because, as has been mentioned before, PASO Release 12 can connect remotely, so using the network connection to a Release 11.7 database, but it's not possible the other way around.
Great.
That's my suggestion.
How long do you expect support to be available for 11.7? Is there a sunset plan or a timeline where support will not be provided for 11.7.x?
Right. So again, support is the thing, right? You can call, and we have customers calling with version 8, 9 questions, 10 questions. Those have been required for a long time. You can still call tech support on those versions, and you can still get consulting support. But you won't be getting any bug fixes or updates. Development will not be spending any time on those old versions. So again, if support is somebody calling tech support, as long as you're on maintenance, you can call tech support.
Great, thank you. Well, it looks like that was our last question. So if you have any more questions, you can get in touch with us at Progress. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining our webinar, and we hope you have a great day.